Hi there, this is Carlos. My YouTube channel is mainly in Spanish, but from time to time I find things that I want to share with you. I don't find a similar thing in English, so please be patient with my accent. I just want to share with you this time this file. And this file is a homemade do-it-yourself string action gauge. So if you don't want to spend your money in buying a string action gauge, you can just print it and use it. This is not as accurate, of course, as a professional tool, but this will do, of course. This will do. I use it. I've compared it with my with my filler gauges. It measures quite well, as long as you cut it quite well. Okay, so there are several ways to measure your strings action. One of them is to use filler gauges, which are simple sheets of steel with different thickness. I've never found this to be handy to measure strings action. Okay, you can do that, of course. It's the way it's been done for years, but I'm never sure if the filler gauge is exactly that measure. Okay, so the other thing you can do is to buy a string action gauge like this one. This is a steel action gauge, very useful. But I bought this in eBay, and this is a very cheap model which is not accurate. After buying this, I just measured that and I realized that it wasn't accurate. This is I guess this is a Chinese copy. So if you want to buy one, I would strongly recommend buying the professional Stewart McDonald string action gauge, which is accurate, of course. If you don't want to spend that money, you can simply print the file I want to share with you today, which is this one. After printing this file, you can cut it and you can have a homemade string action gauge, which is, I think, accurate enough. Okay, after cutting that, you will have something like this, and this is what we're going to use to measure our string action. You just need to have this file is in the description of the video, and the only thing you have to take into account is that you don't want to allow any resizing of the during the printing process. Okay, so in the dialog box, in the printing dialog box of your software, I guess Acrobat Reader or something like that, don't allow for any resizing. Just print the actual size. Okay, and if your printer is complicated, probably the driver will be able to make any resizing as well. So print it with the highest resolution possible. Print this without any resizing, and if you want to make sure you have not made any resizing, you can measure. If you use this one is in millimeters, this one is in inches. So if you're going to measure in millimeters, you just have to measure that this is 10 centimeters long, and if you're going to measure in inches, you just have to measure that this is 4 inches long. Okay, if that matches, then you have not resized it during the printing process. Once you have printed this, the only have to do is to cut it, and in order to cut it with some accuracy, I strongly suggest using a scalpel along with a ruler for this side of the rectangle. Okay, the other sides are not important, but this side is the one you're going to use to compare. So I would use a scalpel with a ruler. If you don't have a cutting mate for using that, you can put several papers together and cut it over that. Once you have cut it, it's very easy to use. The only thing you have to do is to hold your guitar in playing position, okay, and to put your new ruler, behind the string, so that you can see where the strings are, how high the string is. Okay. Usually, when I have to compare two guitars, I always measure in the same fret. Usually, the 12th fret is the fret, but some builders in their setup guides, they tell you to measure in different points. For example, Fender tells you to measure in the 17th fret, and Ibanez tells you to measure in the 14th fret. that's the setup guide. If you're going to set up a guitar, I will follow the builder's setup guide, but when comparing guitars, I always measure in the 12th fret. Okay. What strings actions are usual? Well, it depends greatly. When you're going to set your string action, you will always have to compromise. There are several factors, and you have to take them into account. But generally, you have playability versus tone. Okay. The great problem with very low actions is that strings always rattle against the frets. Sometimes that rattling doesn't sound through the amplifier, so that allows you for real low actions. But although they don't sound through the amplifier, it subtracts energy from the strings, so the tone is not so good and the sustain is not so good. It's shorter. Okay. The other problem with very low actions is that your fretwork has to be perfect, which is not usual for cheap guitars. Fretworks, good fretworks only are achieved in very high grade guitars or guitars that has just go out from the luthier shop. And the other problem is that some very aggressive, very curved fretboards don't allow for bendings, even if the action is high. So this guitar has a vintage radius. This has a 7¼ inches radius in the fretboard. That's very curved fretboard. There's no fretboards with such an aggressive curve. And the problem with this guitar, even if this guitar has a very high action, out of specs, the problem with this guitar is that if you play a bending, simple bending of a tone, if you want to play this, here you're about to lose your sound. A little bit more, it disappears. Okay? There it goes out. It frets out. And that happens simply for geometry. This is a piece of a circumference, and the straight line that goes from this point to the corresponding saddle, that straight line passes through the frets, through the space where the frets are, so it can't sound. Okay. If the fretboard is flatter, anything from 12 inches and flatter, you won't have that problem. So it will allow you to have lower string actions without this problem. Okay, but again, lower string actions require very good fretworks. Most setup guides are expressed in 74th of an inch because most important builders are based in the USA. Some other builders are based in Japan or in Europe, such as Ibanez, for example, and their setup guides are expressed in millimeters. You can use whatever you want because all in all they are the same, and you will have to find your sweet spot for yourself, for your technique, for your taste. So you can use whichever measurements you prefer. In the file I've left you, there are 2 copies for measuring in millimeters and 2 copies for measuring in inches, as you prefer. And there are 2 copies just for you to have 2 tries for cutting. Okay, it's quite easy to make a correspondence between 74ths and millimeters. There is a very good approximation is that 0.4 millimeters equals 1/74th of an inch. Okay. Taking that into account, what values are usual? Well, in the description of the video there are some typical values, but for electrics anything between 3, 4, 5 for the high E, 3, 4, 5 74ths for the high E, or anything between 6, 5 and 6 74ths for the low E are okay. But that's the margin for you to measure and to adjust. For acoustics, you need a higher action for what I was telling before. You can't avoid any buzzing on acoustics, so you need a higher action. And on acoustics, typical actions are 4 or 5 74ths for the high E, and 6 or 7/74 for the low E. The same apply to basses, 4, 5 74ths for the G string and 6, 7 74ths for the E string. So I think this is accurate enough for amateur purposes, of course. I hope you to use it. I hope you find this useful. If you find that you want to touch your string actions in your electric guitars, I think that's quite easy for anyone. For acoustics, I will take it to a professional. It's much more complicated because you have to remove the saddle, sound the saddle, and install it again. It's not easy. And well, you may find this is too long. 4 inches is too long for measuring. So if that's the case, it's so easy. Just cut in the places where you want to measure, for example, from 2/74 to 8/74, and this will be not so long, okay? And well, when you're going to adjust your electric guitar or your electric bass guitar, you may find two different kind of bridges. Well, if it's a Floyd Rose bridge, it's a mess. So if you don't know what you're doing, take it to a pro or look for a video explaining how to adjust a Floyd Rose type bridge. But you have a typical Fender bridge like this one, you may find different. The saddles can be adjusted individually. If this is the case, you will most likely want to have a template for the radius of the fingerboard. So in the description of the video as well, you have a file containing different templates for different radius, and it's this one, okay? So you can cut the templates, and you will have for each measurement you will have a couple. You may use this one. This is the concave one, and you can compare it with your fingerboard without the strings, and then you can use this one, which is the convex one, and you can use it to put it down the strings near the bridge, down the strings near the bridge, in order to measure and to keep the radius constant, okay? So when you rise or lower your saddles, you can keep the radius the same as your fingerboard radius, and that's important, okay? If you have a Gibson-like bridge, such as Tune-o-matic, or you have any floating bridge, usually 2 points are enough, okay? For example, in a guitar like this, only 2 screws make the bridge swivel, so you don't have to mess with the radius templates, because saddles are not adjustable, okay? Only the whole bridge is adjustable, and obviously the saddles have the same radius as the fingerboard radius. So thank you for watching. Any comments are welcome, any corrections are welcome, any corrections of my English are welcome. Please help me improve, okay? Thank you very much.